Hi, this is Pat with Energy Solution Partners sharing with you a propane fundamental view. As we come into the end of January here and start looking forward to the end of the heating season, I know most of you have plans to deliver an awful lot of propane here yet before the season's done, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But I think we need to start modeling what our propane inventories could look like as we do start to wind down this draw season and start looking forward to the next year. So as we do this, seeing a few data points that I think are fairly alarming here. And again, this is just extrapolating data from the Department of Energy, and also interesting to see how the fundamental picture of propane has really changed here over the years. As we look at total inventories, this is a pretty busy chart with several years plotted. But what I want to point out is the last 2 years, and we've really started with some high inventory levels the past 2 years, and more production has come online. But at the same time as we've built some real nice inventory levels, we've also seen export activity really pick up. And as we come into our draw seasons the last couple of years, we've really drawn down at a much faster rate than we have all these previous seasons here. So just in comparison, and again, the propane market has become much more of a global market with this export activity picking up, where in the past it's pretty much been just a U.S. domestic market. So the fundamental picture has really changed over just the last couple of years. As we look at the export activity, um, and you can see this is what has made such a much larger global market here, is the amount of exports that are leaving the U.S. The green line here, you can see just in the last few weeks we have had a large spike in export activity, but for the whole year or the whole heating season, we've been running much above year ago levels, and looking back just 2 years ago. And the reason for this pickup in the export activity has been new docks that have been open. In the past, we've had a constraint on the amount that we could export because there just wasn't enough loading docks or ships to get it out of the country. And uh, much investment has been made, and a lot of new facilities have come on board here. And so now the propane is leaving the country. And on a world basis, U.S. still remains quite a bit cheaper than some of these other foreign markets, South America, Asia, Europe. So there's a financial incentive to load propane out of the U.S. and ship it to some of these other markets. Now, drilling into this last 2 years, looking at that same inventory chart, you can see as we've come out of the heating season and into the, I guess I'll call it the build season for inventories. We have had nice builds last couple of years, building inventories by 40 plus million barrels until we do come into the heating season. But we've also seen some large draws once we do come into the draw season. And looking where we're at today and just extrapolating out, if we have draws at the same pace as we did a year ago, um, this would suggest we're going to come out of this heating season at 40 million barrels. And I guess keep in mind that does not account for any additional exports over and above a year ago, which we have been running the last few weeks here. We've been running about 2 barrel a month pace more than a year ago. So keep that as a factor that this is perhaps a conservative number where we may come out of this heating season if the demand continues and the export activity continues. And looking back to a year ago, as far as U.S. demand, our heating season was normal to above normal temps. So depending what kind of heating season we finish up here as well in February and March timeframe, but I would expect we should stay on pace to a year ago levels. I don't see a big reason why any of that should change. So um, just thinking ahead and looking where these inventories could be. And again, my 40 million barrel number could be a conservative number. And if we continue on with the exports strong as they have been, that could actually work down closer to the 25 million barrel mark. As we look at production, that is one thing that could change our fundamental picture. But overall, propane production in the U.S. here for the last 3 years, while it has been up here this last heating season, it's not a substantial amount. And for the most part, the past 3 years production has been relatively flat. It is quite a bit higher than it was 3 and 4 years ago. But overall production numbers really haven't been increasing. And I don't think the outlook for increased production is real strong in the near term. As the energy markets collapsed, so much capital spending was taken offline, and there hasn't been any new production fractionators added in the last couple of years. And that may change here as things are coming back, propane prices increase. The margin to pull the propane out of the natural gas stream has been very profitable for the companies that can do that today, and that will probably bring more investment dollars in. But again, that's a longer term picture, and it's not going to happen overnight here. So I don't look for a huge jump in propane production to make up some of this deficit that we're going to have to a year ago or 2 year ago inventory levels. Now, as we kind of extrapolate some of these numbers out, assuming that we're going to come out of this heating season in the 40 million barrel area, perhaps worst case scenario, we could be all the way down here in that 25 million barrel area. So quite a deficit to where we came in to the last 2 years. And if we extrapolate that out again to what the builds have been the last couple of years, I look, if we have a build comparable to the 2015 season, that's going to bring us up to about 80 million barrels that we'll be starting the heating season with, quite a bit lower than the 100 to 110 that we've seen the last couple of years. Again, if we come into this start of this build season at much lower inventories, if the export stays strong, that could suggest we're going to come in here at 65 million barrels if we have a similar build to the last couple of years. So, there's a potential we're going to be coming into the next heating season with some pretty low inventory levels. And, in the past, we used to look for a target of 60 to 70 million barrels is what we wanted to come in with. But again, the whole fundamental picture is different today than it was just 5 years ago. And the drawdown this year alone looks like it could be 60 to 70 million barrels. So if we look at where we may come in, continue with exports the way that they have been, it could paint a pretty rough scenario here coming into the next heating season. Same extrapolation, just comparing to the 2016 build season, which is again very comparable to the year before. So this chart doesn't look a lot different than what the previous one did, but just something we got to be thinking about here and keeping an eye on these weekly numbers, and also how we're going to manage this going forward. Again, this whole scenario I think will be driven by the exports and what prices do on the world market to stymie some of these exports. Maybe we have to get the U.S. price up quite a bit higher than what we're seeing in some of these foreign markets. I don't think we're going to get a lot of new production on board here, so the swing factor will be this export number. So this is definitely something we're going to be watching every week in the reports here. But don't want to be hollering the sky is falling here today, but I want everybody to be aware of what we could be setting up for, and definitely a different scenario today than what we've seen the last couple years coming out of the heating season as far as our propane inventories. So with that, as always, be happy to visit in more detail, start working on your risk management plans for next year. It does create a difficult situation when I realize most of you won't have any gallons sold to end users. Big question, how much risk do you take on? How much do you get bought without having any gallons or commitments sold? Definitely risk involved either way here. We can look at some option strategies, although those are not cheap. But the potential upside here, I think, is very, very strong. So with that, I'd be happy to visit in more detail. Feel free to give me a call, and I'll look forward to visiting. Thank you.